Hi, everybody. It's Dot.
And Bethany.
And we're here to help you write your proposal. Bethany has agreed to be my guinea pig here, and she's going to share some emergent thinking. So we're going to be grateful to her for being vulnerable and willing to share her thinking.
It's very emergent.
So this is a chart, and this chart is, in a sense, your chapter 3. You can see that there's a lot of words here going across, so I thought walking through it would be helpful. So I'm just going to fill out this sample, and then you get to do it for yourself. It's called scaffolding. Okay, so this is Bethany's work. Bethany, tell us, what are some of your intellectual goals for your study?
Sure, Dot. Thank you. Some of my intellectual goals are to better understand how adjunct faculty, specifically part-time, non-tenure track faculty, interact with their employing institution. I'm interested to see how the way they interact with the institution impacts their instruction and their motivation to continue teaching.
Ooh, interesting.
Thank you.
I probably have spelling errors here, but this isn't a polished thing, so I'm just going to keep driving.
Great.
Okay, so when we create a conceptual framework, one way to think about it is that we have like a theory or a couple of theories that are sort of the driving force there. So could you tell me what one of those theories is for you?
Sure. I'm looking specifically at organizational culture theories. And within that context, the second one is conflict theory for me.
Conflict theory. Okay, so maybe tell us just like a couple of key concepts in conflict theory.
Sure. So how power flows to and through organizations and how it is differentially shared with or how it impacts different people within an organization.
Okay, super. So in this case, when we think about your particular study, I'm thinking that the organization is an institution of higher ed.
Yes, exactly.
Can I say IHE for
Sure,
that?
that's
Okay,
perfect.
super. I'm learning the lingo. Okay, and can you talk about like how, in relation to your problem, you might see power flowing or differential impact on people?
Sure. So there's a framework that looks at the a framework for effective faculty work, and it looks at different aspects of the organization. And so specifically, I'm interested in employment equity and how power functions within that for adjunct faculty as well as professional growth. And each of those pieces are essential elements of the framework for effective faculty work.
Okay. You said professional growth.
Yes.
Okay, and so kind of just to make sure I'm clear, like when you're talking about like power flow and differential impact, I'm guessing in this case typically adjuncts have less power and
Yes,
so on.
yeah,
Okay.
and in the form of often like access to resources or information.
Okay, so power as access to resources.
Yeah, I think
info.
resources, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's a very small snippet. You'll have more to say about that in your proposal.
I sure hope so.
So you're thinking about doing some qualitative work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing that your research questions will probably be particular and maybe realist and process questions?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, super. Can you have a go at asking one of your research questions?
I would love to have a go at it. So I'm interested in, like, through the framework for rethinking faculty work, how does institutional support and training affect the adjunct experience?
Okay.
And experience is super broad, but I'll define that specifically through employment equity and professional growth.
Okay. So let's take a moment with this one.
Okay.
So, institutional support, like writ large in the whole world or in a particular place?
Interesting. So, specifically at Portland State.
Okay, so at a large urban
yes.
university or
Totally.
something.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And training effect. So there's kind of a variance quality there,
Yeah.
like how does variable A affect outcome
Okay.
B? But that's not really what you mean.
No, I don't.
What? Say more about effect.
So specifically, I'm interested in how it's affecting or impacting their instructional choices. And more, I guess it's more though. I pulled the lens back a little bit, so it's like, how is it shaping their
I just
experience?
wrote shape. I literally just wrote shape.
I didn't even look at it.
Okay. Oh my
Having
gosh.
a moment.
This is such a moment, you guys. You just witnessed that via screencast. We're living the dream. Okay, so yes, I think that's a little bit more.
Yes, I mean
okay.
shape. That's great.
And there's more to do here, of course, but you're barking up a valuable tree.
Yeah.
As you go forward after our conversation, you can add other research questions here, or you might even have multiple rows for one research question, and I'll tell you why.
Great.
When we get to talking about collecting data, it's so quiet in here, isn't it? When you get to talking about collecting data, you might have, like, say, you might have interviews and observations for that. So do separate rows for those. Okay. Which of your intellectual goals, well, you kind of had the one intellectual goal, so I'm just going to paste that in here.
Okay, cool.
So the idea is to make sure if I'm asking a research question, it should be addressing an intellectual goal. Does asking this question about how institutional support shapes the experience help you understand how the faculty interact with the employing institution? That seems like a yes to me. Yeah,
I think so.
So we're just looking for alignment there. Okay, so the site, you said PSU.
PSU, I want to look at 3 departments, and I'm specifically wanting to look at adjunct faculty that work with undergraduate students. I'd like the departments. Another intellectual goal I have is around flexible degree programs and use of the learning management system. So a common point for the departments I'm going to choose, I'd like them to have pretty well developed flexible degree options.
Ooh, okay.
So
you have a rationale for your site selection.
Rationale,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Well developed. You just said it. Flexible degree. And what about like learning management system too, or?
Yeah, I guess within that, like well-developed flexible degree programs, and like common use of the LMS, which that's an assumption.
By which we mean D2L.
Yes.
For those, I don't know if everyone knows that but me, but now we all do. Okay, so then within these sites, who might you be observing, talking to, etc.?
Yeah, so I would like to talk to the adjunct faculty. I'd like to talk to the individual in the department who is in charge of onboarding and training of any sort, and those might be 2 different individuals, but it will differ by department.
Okay.
So whether that's the department chair or if it's a department coordinator, they have different titles.
Yeah. Okay. Could be chair, could be coordinator. It could be someone who's more like in a staff position, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And then I also want to do document analysis. So I guess that's not participants, but in addition, around specific policies as well as any documented training materials.
Policies? Just policies for the university?
For onboarding within the department.
Okay. About onboarding.
And even if they have anything documented about best practices for use of the LMS, I'm curious to see what they even have there.
And then there was something else you said. Policies and this. The other thing. What's funny is that people can...
Training?
Training. Okay, there you go.
People can what?
People could just rewind and they'll know what you said. Okay,
Lucky.
So, and then I think these are both still related to this question. Okay. So see how I did that?
Cool.
Like magic.
Yeah, that works.
So how will I negotiate access to site participants? So have you thought about how you're going to get people to participate? Do you have an in?
I have, but I don't have answers yet. So I have ins with the department technology coordinators for 2 of the departments that I'm thinking of. So I think that's a way to start. I also have an in with the Office of Academic Innovation on campus and a mentor there who I'm hoping can provide guidance as to connections with people to talk to.
Okay. Do you think there's any considerations or strategies in terms of like, can you imagine people being resistant to participating?
Yeah, I think because it's well documented that adjunct faculty have a lot of different motivators. If it's someone who is maybe new to the institution or is worried about maintaining a positive status and keeping their role. Maybe they also, for adjunct faculty, have a lot of different responsibilities external to their role at the university. I think all of those are factors that could hinder participation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the department coordinators too, I wouldn't want it to be posed, or any leadership position I'm talking to, not as like a gotcha, but simply like an understanding of what's currently taking place.
Yeah, that's going to take some careful thinking. We won't do all that right now, but it's going to be in your proposal, like your plan. And what's great, I like to plan things out. Here's a little sidebar. Like my action plan when I write a lesson plan is to be specific enough that if I were in the middle of class to have a stroke and have to keep on teaching, that the plan would guide me. So
that's great.
If you can spell it out to that point, then you don't have to worry about it because like
if I have a stroke wall.
Yeah. Not to make light of strokes, but literally that's how I think about it. Yeah. So maybe the thinking in such morbid terms will help you.
Yes.
Okay.
Take a go at
it. Data sources and collection strategies. So, so sounds like interviews. So tell me more about like substantive frames. Are you trying to do you remember synchronic or diachronic report?
What I'm struggling with right now is I've been kind of deciding between focus groups or one-on-one interviews. I'm leaning more towards the one-on-one interviews because I want to get at the heart of individual experience. But I'm not quite sure yet what I want those questions to look like. I'd like to define it more clearly under the umbrellas of the essential elements of the framework for rethinking faculty work, and I want that to guide my questions, but I haven't really decided what that should look like.
So yes, you want that to guide your questions, and also keep in mind that you aren't just going to ask your framework at people. It's a tricky thing, right? So thinking about what doors do I need to open sort of in the person such that they offer up material that maps on. Okay, so I encourage you, I'm not going to make you do this on the spot, but go back to those question types that we talked about today. Like, is a grand tour of their training experience going to be helpful? Is an emotional focused question going to be helpful? Maybe less so, I don't know.
I kind of like to think when we were reading about the presupposition, those questions, and specifically I think it was in the Glesney, thinking about if there is a common experience I'd like to highlight in each of the three departments, or for the faculty, do I want to ask questions like that to keep it open-ended, but to assume certain things, like that there was something that went well or poorly. Like the simplest.
And both, right? So with presupposition, like I'll say, like we'll talk about ways you were satisfied or dissatisfied and dissatisfied. So with the training, I'm totally just putting words in your mouth. And so like, we'll start with satisfied and then go to both.
Okay.
And that way you're not saying like, tell me all the ways that this stunk.
Yes.
Ethical factors. So as you think about maybe the positionality of your adjuncts, any worries about them or their participation or things you need to consider?
I think one of the worries I have, which could impact their desire to participate in the first place, that I kind of touched on, is if they feel like they're in a precarious position with further employment, depending on what their contract looks like. If they're in like those first 2 years and their department hasn't encouraged a longer contract or a multi-term. I also think that, I don't know, I'm not currently an adjunct instructor here at PSU, so being really clear with my own motivations, like why is this something that I'm curious about? I think because I'm curious about their experience I want to center that. A lot of the literature I've read focuses on the organization over the faculty, and so I'd like to really look at the experience of the faculty within the organization. I don't know. I think
like it foregrounds the organization.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think just based on the nature of their role, they're in a tough spot because it's not continuous employment. So
yeah. So part of what your task will be is to think about. I mean, you can't change that.
Yeah.
You could choose to go with people who've been here longer, but then they're further from the experience, right? Of being trained, at least initially. So you can think about ways you can mitigate that, right?
Right.
Like certainly, pseudonyms and masking of the, identities.
Okay.
So it's not identifiable is one layer of that. You want to think about how you're going to present the project to people.
Okay.
So that it feels like non-threatening and how you present your role. And I'm sure there's more pieces there. And like each of those might be like a little paragraph in your proposal, right?
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to leave the documents for now.
Okay.
But with the interviews, you've recorded an interview. Now what?
Yeah, so I guess after that first one, I'm going to do my own memo, like a reflection on how that looks. From the very beginning, I'd like to be, I don't want my framework to be limiting as far as the codes that I use. So I liked what you mentioned today about maybe using in vivo, which I need to do more reading about. But maybe starting with that, but then seeing how those fit within the framework, if they do, or what's missing. Because what I'm kind of arguing with the framework is that adjunct faculty are omitted from that. And so that's not something that appropriately includes their experience. So yeah, I guess
totally just did what that interviewer did today.
You stopped thinking?
I started thinking about how to spell the word I was writing, and then so you said in vivo codes. I want to read more about that, and then how the framework fits,
or how they might fit within the framework, or what is missing from the framework based on what emerges from the interviews.
Okay.
Because that's a hypothesis that I have, that the framework doesn't appropriately include the adjunct experience.
Yeah. Okay.
But I guess I'll see.
Okay, so...
And I'm going to do document analysis also. So I need to do more of that. Or figure out what that will look like. Because I don't know what the specific documents are yet.
So Maxwell talks about
yes,
categorizing versus connecting strategies. So sort of like categorizing in terms of like looking at types, this is an example of X, this is an example of Y. And when we think in those terms, what we might yield is like a synchronous report where it's like, here are the 3 categories of important issues around adjuncts in this area. If I go with connecting or contextualizing strategies, I'm more thinking about the flow of the process, like how it unfolds. A leads to B to C, right? And it's a little messier. It's not like, it's a little harder to use the cactus, the computer assisted qualitative data analysis software. But that's, I think so. So, what am I trying to say there? So when you think about analyzing this, do categories seem most relevant? Do connective pieces seem most relevant? Some of
I kind of want
why?
to do both.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess categories to start, but I see like my analysis coming from the connection that can be drawn, or more of a connective approach. I'm not quite sure yet, but I need to do more thinking about that.
Yeah. So like, at this point, what we have here, totally appropriately, is kind of boilerplatey, right? But you're starting to think about it, right?
Yeah.
And so like you're picturing yourself with this interview transcript. You know that you're gonna, you know that before you even transcribe it, you're gonna be memoing after the interview, and that memo itself is data, right? and you know that you want to get the voices of the participants in your codes, right? So that's a good start. I think if you're moving back and forth across categorizing and connecting and that like forest and the trees sort of thing, you may find that playing with different data displays is helpful, and thinking ahead of time of like what that might look like. Like maybe I'm totally just making this up, but like maybe there could be a display that shows like, I don't know, like your different participants or different departments as like a table. Often data displays are tables, like down the side, and then like maybe like expectations they had coming in to the training, and then maybe some of the codes and categories you had with that, and then like what they experienced during, and then like how they're experiencing it after. Like that's one way to think of it. Like get a time thing there, and there's all kinds of like across and down. You know, you could look, whoa, they had lots of different experiences by department or by individual, and like, you know, it's I'm combing the air like down and across, and that's how I think of data analysis. Down and across. Okay, so there's more to do here. And I encourage you to do the more before you oops, this is a typo anyway. Okay, how might I be wrong? So this is where you're thinking, okay, I've analyzed these interviews and the documents, and I'm trying to answer this question about how the training and institutional support are shaping the adjunct experience. How might I be misled, or how might I come to a conclusion that isn't defensible?
That's a good question. I guess my bias after doing all the reading is that adjunct faculty are inappropriately or inadequately supported. So I initially need to be aware of the questions that I'm asking that aren't leading to that end. I guess I haven't really thought about this one a lot.
That totally makes sense that you wouldn't have. So things to consider. Let's like kind of walk through these. So there's self-report, right? The fact that you're going to have these people who are in a precarious position, they're going to want to say like, oh yeah, I totally use D2L, like up, down, and backwards, right?
True.
Or I don't know, maybe they're pissed at their department and they want to say something negative. I don't know. Let's see, rival explanations. I don't know, maybe the reason that they are not using the LMS in the end is just because they're Luddites who hate technology, and it's not about the training. So, you know, you're looking for other reasons to explain things that you think you could find, right? Like
what might come out that I hadn't anticipated?
Or like things that, okay, well, tell me what you think you might find when you ask people about this process, about the training and the support they got.
I think it will probably show that they, based on the training they get, their use of, well, this is the old rabbit hole I was going down, because I don't think I'm going down this hole yet.
No more LMS.
So, no more LMS.
Okay.
But I was originally thinking it's going to tell us that they use it to eliminate the LMS in a limited way based on the training and support that's provided. But I want to know basically just like what professional growth opportunities are provided, what elements of employment equity are communicated to them and then exist for them within their role, and how does that impact their experience?
Okay. So, and it's still broad. It's still broad, right? But that's okay. So let's say the person on the whole is sort of dissatisfied with the professional development they've been offered.
Yeah.
Your instinct, or, you know, your subjectivity that's driving your choices about what data to collect might lead you to kind of assume that that's about just a general lack of support, when really there could be some other reason they feel like that. Like maybe, you know, like I'm thinking about the critical theory group, like maybe it's about that there was no one in the department that was working with them that they had affinity with, you know, they didn't feel represented, and so it felt separate. Or maybe they were, they come from a more, I don't know, a behaviorist background, and the information that was provided was on a sociocultural level, and it didn't jive, or you know what I mean? So like,
well, that makes sense. So I have explored briefly the like different typologies of adjunct faculty that I simply use as a way to like define the diverse group. But I think that's a huge implication at this point, because based on the reason that they're teaching as a part-time faculty member, I think like that motivation definitely will impact any data that I get from this.
Yeah. So part of what you're going to be thinking about in terms of how you might be wrong is if you fail to capture that piece. Like if you're sort of looking at the wrong thing or asking the wrong question in a sense. Yeah. So that's a good start, right? Okay. But we want to try to talk in specifics kind of at that level. Okay. So we sort of talked through this next one, which is like, I might be wrong in these ways. Here's how I can address that. Like things like triangulation. What are you going to triangulate, right? Et cetera. Okay. Ethical factors I'll need to address in my data analysis. You started talking about bias. Yeah.
I think too, just their role as a part-time faculty member. Ethically, if the individual in the department who's in charge of training or anything like that, if I'm making sure that I'm maintaining confidentiality of any adjunct faculty with whom I'm connecting when I'm also communicating with that person in a leadership role. So, like that the power dynamic doesn't negatively impact the data that I get from the adjuncts. Yeah. Or that there's like inappropriate pressure placed on them to participate from the person in the department lead role or whatever.
Okay. And I think partly you're thinking about that in terms of the data collection, which is it totally makes sense. And then as you flesh out the analysis part a little bit more, considering just the steps that you're taking with, you're looking at these transcripts beyond just confidentiality, like where, for example, if we have a strong, adherence to, affection for a particular framework, it's easy to sort of see it everywhere and miss other things. And there's an ethical quality to that because you're trying to, you know what I'm saying? You're trying to have a genuine, authentic outcome. Okay. So I don't know. That was more than 7 minutes. But you have a little sketch of one question, and like when you go home, you could really flesh out each of these a lot more, and then do it for each of your other data sources for that question, each of your other questions, and then basically, like a table like this with less detail can go right in your proposal. Like that's a really good thing to put in the proposal to show, like, especially columns like research question, site, data collection strategies, and steps to analyze. Like those ones, maybe I should color code those. If you put that in, then the questions the committee will have about, hey, how does this data answer that question? Or what are you going to do with that data? And how does that analysis answer the question? Like, you're like, wow, let me take you to table 4. It's right here.
Perfect.
And then you also like write it out in narrative. And
cool.
Yeah. So basically you're done with your proposal. Congratulations.
Yay, high five. No gaps.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome.